name is JP Miller, and I am the author of Leaders Like Us, a children's picture book series by Carson DeLusa with Rourke Educational Media. What inspired me to write the book? You know, it was during the last presidential election, and Kamala Harris was nominated as the vice president nominee on the Democratic Party. And I started seeing different things on Facebook and other places that said, well, she was not the first woman of color to be nominated as vice president of the United States. And I was like, wow, you know, this, really? And so I kept seeing this name, Charlotta Bass. And so I said, let me research this name a little bit. And I did, and come to find out that Charlotta Bass, an African-American woman, was actually nominated to be on the Progressive Party ticket for vice president in 1952. So of course that was just mind-boggling to me. So I dug a little bit more and found more and more information. So I said to my editor at Carson DeLusa, I was like, we have got to write this story because this lady is basically disappeared in history, and it's definitely something that needs to be told. She's an unsung hero that we didn't know anything about. So I wanted to bring her story to light.
Perfect.
Tell you about the book. So the book is a biography, of course, and it chronicles the life of Charlotta Bass. She was actually born in Sumter, South Carolina, but she lived the majority of her life in Rhode Island in the North. And so things were quite different in the North than they were from the South. She got involved early on in newspapers, and they had early African-American newspapers, and she got involved with that. Then she moved to California, to Los Angeles. And so that's when really the crux of her life in politics and journalism began. So she actually has history in journalism and politics. Well, you know, I had a lot of takeaways and things that I learned in writing about Charlotta Bass. First, I'd probably say the birth of the African-American newspapers. When I was younger and growing up, there were a few African-American newspapers that were pretty popular, and of course the magazines. But this just showed me the importance and kind of how they evolved. And she was really a major component in journalism, especially when she got to California and was working in Los Angeles with the California Eagle, which was one of the largest African-American newspapers on the West Coast and maybe even the United States. But I think that was one takeaway. And the other one was, you know, it just blew me away that here was this woman in 1952, and she was speaking in a big convention hall when she accepted the nomination in Chicago. Can't remember the name of it right offhand, but it just amazed me that this woman had the strength and the courage to do that, because in a building such as that and many other buildings at that time, they had, you know, the signs that said, you know, no colored people or colored people enter through the rear. And so here was this African-American lady standing on this national stage. And that was just phenomenal to me.
JP, what surprised you most in your research? Maybe something when you were doing your research that may not even made it into the book.
Well, you know, there were a couple of surprises to me, and they didn't make it into the book. I think one of them did, but one of the main things that surprised me was that she had so much power with her newspaper, and she was empowering African Americans with the things that she was discussing. It went from, once she became the owner of the California Eagle, it went from a 4-page tabloid to a 20-page national newspaper. And it was so funny because, well, it wasn't funny, but it was interesting that Department of Justice began to investigate her. And so it was just kind of a way of trying to stop her or scare her. And they were saying that her newspaper was funded by Japan and Germany, so she had to go through these, these audits and letting these people in, because they were really trying to shut her down. And the other surprise, on her platform for the vice president, the things that she discussed and was talking about was healthcare, housing, police brutality. She was really big on police brutality. And I just had to, just let out a deep breath. And it was like, it's not changed. Every election, when it's talking about the concerns of the African American community, those things are still being discussed. And so that was kind of surprising to me that, it's been discussed since 1952, and here we are in 2021, and we're still discussing the same things.
So JP, why do you feel it is important that this story is remembered and shared? And also, what do you feel is Mrs. Bass's lasting legacy?
I think that this story should be shared because number one, we have this African-American lady that was paving the way for people like Kamala Harris to be on a ticket of a major party during a national election, not just local, but this was national. So I think it's important that we definitely give the credit where credit is due. She has been long lost in history, and hopefully this story will bring her name back up. More and more people will be talking about her because she did do some very good things. And I think that, in her heart of hearts, she knew that she was not going to win the election. But at the same time, she felt like she was winning just by being able to stand before people that she normally would not have been able to stand before and discuss the issues of the African-American community. And now I would like to share with you the story of Charlotta Bass. Have you ever wanted to change a rule that seemed unfair? Have you worked with others to make a change? Charlotta Bass helped others by fighting for policy changes. She got people in the United States to fix important problems. Charlotta looked over the top of her wire-rimmed glasses into the crowd. There were laws that kept Black people from entering most buildings, but she stood proudly on the convention stage in Chicago, Illinois. She was there to accept the Progressive Party's 1952 nomination for vice president. She could have the second highest office in the United States government. After the convention, Charlotta took her campaign on the road. She enabled Black people to talk about issues in their communities. She spoke about ways to change the rules and help people. When discussing the election, she told people, win or lose, we win by raising the issues. Political parties. In 1952, voters could join one of three political parties that best fit their beliefs. They were the Democratic, Republican, and Progressive parties. The Progressive Party wanted to end the Korean War and racial discrimination. Don't fence me in. Charlotta was born in 1874 in Sumter, South Carolina. She grew up in the state of Rhode Island. Even when she was young, newspapers were important to Charlotta. After college, she went to work for a local Black newspaper, the Providence Watchman. There, she organized the paper's finances and tripled their ad sales. In 1910, she moved from Rhode Island to Los Angeles, California. Many people in the United States were moving west at that time. They were looking for a better life. Together, they built schools, started businesses, and formed communities. Charlotta's newspaper was flying off newsstands. She had been working there when she bought the press for $50 at an auction. She renamed it the Eagle to the California Eagle. She didn't want her newspaper to look like others. She wanted to write about the good things that women and Black people were doing. She hired Joseph Blackburn Bass as an editor. Charlotta was becoming a leader in business and in journalism. Working together. Charlotta married Joseph Bass. Together, they grew the California Eagle from 4 pages to 20. They increased printing to 60,000 copies, more than any other African-American newspaper on the West Coast of the United States. Charlotta's newspaper was her weapon. She waged war in print against housing discrimination, police brutality, and a lack of jobs for Black people. She wouldn't give up. She wrote articles, printed stories, and listened to the people. Charlotta ran for a seat on the Los Angeles Council. Although she lost, she stayed true to her slogan, "Don't fence me in." People were proud to have her as their leader. Even people who disapproved of what she was doing could not fence her in. Many kinds of bravery. In the 1950s, it was considered unladylike to be outspoken. This was especially true for a Black woman. Charlotta was bold and brave. She wrote a weekly column on the sidewalk about the lives of people in the Black community. It inspired her readers. The readers trusted her. Charlotta brought the national "Don't Buy Where You Can't Work" movement to Los Angeles. Black people stopped shopping at stores that would not hire them. As a result, these stores made less money. This pressure made white businesses hire Black workers. It made some people angry. Charlotta was brave in other ways too. One night, a hate group called the Ku Klux Klan went to the newspaper office to scare Charlotta. Instead, she scared them away. African Americans were told that life was better for them in Africa. They were told they should go back home. Charlotta did not agree with the Back to Africa movement. She used her newspaper to deliver the message that Black people were Americans. They were here to stay. Charlotta was courageous on many levels. She was brave and fought against unfair rules. She stood up to hatred. She was brave to run for vice president in 1952. She was the first African-American woman to be nominated for vice president. She did what others were afraid to do. The Federal Bureau of Investigation started watching Charlotta. They listened in on her phone calls. They wrote reports about her. They accused her of working against the United States. They tried to block her from publishing things they did not like in her newspaper. Charlotta stopped working for the newspaper in 1951. In 1952, she ran for vice president with Vincent Hallinan, who wanted to be president. The Progressive Party did not win. However, she never stopped fighting for equal rights. She turned her garage into a community reading room. During election season, it doubled as a voter registration site. Charlotta wrote a book about her life titled 40 Years, Memoirs from the Pages of a Newspaper. Charlotta died in 1969 at the age of 95. She was inducted to the California Hall of Fame in October of 2014 for her work in civil rights. 3 years later, she was also inducted into the California Newspaper Hall of Fame. They honored Charlotta for being the managing editor of the California Eagle from 1912 to 1951. No matter what she did, Charlotta worked hard to make life easier in the future for others. Here I could sit at the head of the table as a founding member, write my own pet program, a program for me and my people that came from us. Also included in the book is a timeline of Charlotta Bass' life. There's a glossary index, and there's text-independent questions and also an extended activity. I hope you've enjoyed your time with me today and the story of Charlotta Bass.